안녕하세요. A1180과 에어브리지 대표 맡고 있는 남성필입니다. 이번 세션은 이제 연사자분을 저희가 해외에서 모셨기 때문에 영어로 진행할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. So thank you everyone for joining this session. I'm so excited to actually talk about Post-ATT iOS user acquisition strategies and SKAdNetwork. So maybe before we deep dive into the actual topic of Post-ATT iOS user acquisition strategies, I want to actually introduce to you Marcus. So Marcus, you've flown all the way from Berlin, Germany. So would you like to introduce yourself to the audience first?
Yes, sure. First of all, thanks again for inviting me, Roy. It's incredible to be here and speaking to all of you today. As already mentioned, my name is Marcus. I've worked in the mobile growth industry for around about 11 years now. Started my career back in 2012 in gaming for one of the biggest games developers in Germany called InnoGames, strategy titles like Forge of Empires and Elvenar. And I moved into subscription apps in 2019, working for Blinkist, and then my last employer was Tandem, a language learning social network. I think they're also quite big in Korea, actually. And yeah, I've been consulting for around a year now and kind of working for myself, specialized in paid social and full funnel optimization.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. So I'm a big fan of Marcus. I've been reading his LinkedIn posting all the time. So if you would like to get more advice on iOS subscription, retention, anything related to mobile application, please follow his LinkedIn. So
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So to set the stage for today's discussion, I want to actually touch base what's happening in Korea for iOS marketers. So I actually prepared some of the most important stats that you want to see. And I want to actually touch some of these stats and really open up the discussion. So according to Airbridge data, actually iOS has much larger market share for many of these mobile applications that are serviced in Korea. So this stat actually shows you that iOS, amazingly, it accounts for 44.4% of the entire market in Korea. So actually, I know there's so many fashion apps and commerce marketers right here. And if you are targeting the younger generation and a female end users especially, you would actually see amazingly high iOS share in this market. And actually, I want to also touch base the ATT. So we all know that ATT got implemented from April 2021. And then amazingly, right now, almost all of the iOS devices in Korea are subject to the ATT prompt. And not only just that, we also have to talk about SKAdNetwork. And we also know that SKAdNetwork SKAN 4.0 got released last year. And then also amazingly, the devices that have the version of equal to or above 16.1 accounts for 86%. And lastly, and most importantly, I want to talk about the ATT opt-in rate. So when you actually show the ATT prompt, the Airbridge Korean devices data actually shows you that the ATT opt-in rate is around 23%, which is pretty low. And then back in the days when we actually could get the IDFA so easily, now it's getting harder and harder for us to really get the granular device level data. And only 1/4 of entire end users opt in for ATT. So considering all these difficult situations, I want to actually ask you, Marcus, what are the real day-to-day operational challenges that marketers would normally face these days?
Yeah, sure. So if you're anything like me, you read up a lot about kind of how SKAN works when SKAN 3 came out, SKAN 4 is coming out now, and I felt like super prepared once this happened. But then once I started working in my ad accounts, I was like, okay, I actually don't know what's going on and what to do now. And so the main challenges I think that we're facing as marketers are once the postback delays, so data isn't always fresh, you have kind of a time window from when a postback can come in. There's privacy thresholds, now going to be called crowd anonymity tiers in SKAN 4, which just mean that you need to reach a certain amount of installs per campaign in order to actually track on a granular level. Then there's the challenge of value extrapolation, so actually knowing how valuable the trials that I'm getting are going to be in the long term, or for gaming apps, how many in-app purchases might happen in the future. And the fourth one is creative level tracking, because in SKAN 3 you actually don't have granularity on a creative level, which just means you need to structure campaigns in a certain way in order to actually get actionable results out of them.
Well, yeah, thanks for bringing up these 4 challenges. So maybe it would be good if we can deep dive into each one of them. So why don't we talk first about post-spec delay and privacy thresholds? How can we cope with these challenges?
Sure, let's dive into that. So in terms of the post-spec delay, I thought we'd kick things off with a Yoda quote, one of the wisest characters out there. It's all about patience, and it's actually always been when you optimize ad accounts. You shouldn't take action based on same-day data or just looking at short time frames because things are volatile, things are not significant. So really make sure you always look at reasonable time frames, last 7 days, last 14 days, and you're also looking into trends. By now, most of the app platforms actually have a nice visualization of trends, so you can easily follow what's going on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, make sure that your decisions are really based on significant amount of data. I brought 2 little examples here just from a campaign from one of the ad accounts I'm running. First 2 days of data were kind of you're already spending, but no conversion events are coming in. And then when you pause a campaign, there's no spend anymore, but you have this delay of additional conversion events coming in at the end. So this is something you need to account for and include all the data when analyzing.
Yeah, I mean, just to help your understanding, actually, there's something called post-spec delay in SKAdNetwork, and then the post-spec delay is actually known to be around 24 hours to 72 hours maximum. So what Marcus just showed us is actually when you run the campaign, in the past you were able to get the feedback just immediately when you start the campaign, but now you actually have to wait like 24 hours, 48 hours, or even up to 72 hours to get the results, just like the screenshot below.
Sure. Yeah, and talking about privacy thresholds, which are now going to be called crowd anonymity tiers. Yeah, just to touch back on that, basically what this means is that you need to generate a certain amount of installs per campaign before Apple will actually pass back a postback that has additional data attached to it. So as a marketer, it's super important to know how many of my postbacks actually had data with them and to reach, of course, the highest levels of anonymity so you get as much data as you're able to. And maybe, Roy, you can tell us a little bit about how Airbridge also can help you with that.
Yeah, so what Marcus is saying is definitely I agree with Marcus that we should consolidate the campaign. So there's a concept of privacy threshold under SKAdNetwork. And then it's actually empirically known to be around 10 to 20 installs per each campaign for the last 24-hour rolling window. So that means if your campaign do not meet this privacy threshold of 10 to 20 installs a day, you might not be able to get the conversion value, and that will affect your measurement and optimization. So it's so much important, as you mentioned, to really consolidate the campaigns and then focus your budget on some of these select campaigns. And how you can actually get to know about all these metrics is actually, for example, in Airbridge, MMP, when you enter the MMP dashboards, you will be able to find the metric called is null conversion rate. So is null conversion rate, if this metric for a certain campaign is pretty high, then actually you have to spend more on the campaign in order to lower it down. And same applies to SKAN 4.0, where it has the concept of crowd anonymity. And then there's like 4 tiers from 0 to 3. And then if you only receive the crowd anonymity of tier 0, then you will not be able to get the sufficient post-install data. So yeah, and to answer your question, MMP is null conversion rate, and crowd anonymity tier value is something that you should always take a look at.
Yeah, super valuable to know these values and actually see on a campaign level how much postbacks can I expect. Is my performance low because I just don't have visibility, or is my performance low because it's actually low? I wanted to spend some more time on account consolidation because I think it's kind of accepted by now that you want to have a few campaigns that are driving a lot of installs just to overcome these challenges. But what I see in many ad accounts from advertisers is that they went from a pretty granular account structure on maybe country level, different kind of lookalikes, interest targetings, to a consolidation, which for many means they have kind of maybe one campaign, one ad set, and it's all countries in there, and just a broad targeting. And while this kind of follows the best practice of I want to consolidate, you're giving away all your optimization authority to the ad platform, for example, Meta. So I brought this post here that I did the other day on LinkedIn where I'm talking a bit about an account structure for a subscription ad that spends roughly like 50K a month. And what I'm going into here is that, for example, I'm still using lookalike targetings, and I'm also suggesting to use bids on your ad sets and not go with auto bid and let the algorithm handle everything. Because in the end, you always have to ask yourself, how much does the algorithm know about my ideal customer profile? And in the case of a subscription app, in most cases, you will be optimizing for a trial start event. So the algorithm doesn't necessarily know which of these trials converts to a purchase, and it also doesn't know which of these trials will convert into a monthly or yearly purchase, and what's the renewal rates of these. So you're actually operating quite upper funnel. And in order to kind of still deal with that, I think it's still in your hands to make sure you're targeting correctly and you're putting in, for example, bids to tell the algorithm, I know a trial is worth, I don't know, 20 bucks, 30 bucks to me, so that you give some guidance and don't let the optimization happen completely on the algorithmic side.
Interesting. So what you recommend to the marketers is really not only just utilize the optimization target, but also you may have to actually use leverage certain another levers like lookalike audience. Is that correct?
Yes, for example, and it really depends on the optimization goal and how well the algorithm knows the true value. And in a subscription app, it's usually more upper funnel. For e-com advertisers, oftentimes you're kind of optimizing for a purchase, which means the algorithm knows more, but kind of you have to weigh those in.
Yeah, because like the reason why we may have to fall back to these audience targeting that we used to do in the past is because SKAdNetwork is all about aggregated data. It's all statistical data, which means no longer you will be able to identify the user who is most likely to make purchase. Excuse me. So in order for you to really put this like the very, I would say, targeted audience in front of this optimization algorithm, it really helps you really double down your energy and budget to those who are most likely to make a purchase in your product. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think maybe then we can move on to the third topic of value extrapolation.
Sure. So kind of where this challenge is coming from is that your data is now siloed. You used to have the IDFA to put everything together. You knew which channel users were coming from and how they're behaving in product. Now your scan data is what's happening on UA side, and your product data you can track in an amplitude or mixed panel is siloed from that, and it won't tell you which channel this user originated from. There's additional data sources like the users that have actually opted into ATT, which kind of gives you a smaller group of people that you can still tie back to a channel. Advertisers are starting to layer MMM on top. So basically you have all these data silos and are trying to create like a growth strategy based on that. I would like to focus on the first two, scan and product, and how kind of I try to deal with these on a day-to-day basis when optimizing my ad accounts. And so what I would usually recommend advertisers is to try to create as much overlap between these two as possible. So on the scan side, this means you can go deeper into product than, for example, optimizing for a trial start event as a subscription app, because you actually, for example, on Meta ads have 24 hours for that conversion event to happen. The trial start event happens super early. It's like after 30 minutes or so if you have your paywall and onboarding, if not even earlier. So think of an additional event that can happen later on that qualifies the user even more than just a trial start. In most cases, your product teams will already know what are your kind of activation events that drive long-term user engagement. And if you pair this with a trial start event, you end up with an event that has a much higher likelihood of converting to a paid subscriber, and means that you and your ad account will gain visibility deeper into the funnel than just with a trial start, which is super valuable.
So actually, I can see the engaged trial right there, and could you actually elaborate on more on why you should not only just track the trial itself, but it would be much better if you can track the engaged trial, not just the trial.
Yeah, sure. So in the end, what this helps you with, I mean, first of all, it helps the algorithm to distinguish between a user that only starts a trial or that starts a trial and does additional meaningful actions. So on the one end, Meta or your other ad platforms are going to become more powerful in finding those users as you were used to when leveraging app event optimization. On the other hand, you also gain this data in reporting. So you can see campaign 1 only drove trials, campaign 2 drove trials that also engaged, which means campaign 2 is probably doing better, and you can do your optimization accordingly.
I see. So within the 24-hour window, because you want to maximize the signal that you send to Meta, or Google in this case, it would be much better if you can create the compound event, which not only just includes the event itself, but also part of the activation in it, in order for you to really better understand the users with the SKAN data.
Yes, that's what I would suggest. And you can still track the trial as well because you have enough digits available in your conversion value. So in the end, you can look at the funnel, like who installed, who registered, who started the trial, and who engaged plus trial. And that will help you to really identify the best performing campaigns.
Makes sense. Okay.
And on the product side, I'm usually trying to achieve the same. So like my product data should kind of mirror what I can see in the ad account. So I'm trying to collect additional data points in onboarding. Here's an example from a client of mine called RapChat. It's a music creation app. And the last screenshot is from Yazio, a calorie tracker based in Germany. And what they're doing in onboarding is ask the user where they're coming from, what's their age, what's their gender, and about the persona. That's the second screenshot. So RapChat is asking, are you a producer, are you a singer? Because those are different personas they see in the app. And by gathering these data points, they can attach an LTV to it because they now have it in their product data set and they know how they're behaving long term. And all these data points are also available on the Meta front or on also other ad platforms. So you have a age breakdown in your ad platform. And you can basically look at, am I actually spending on these audiences that I know have high LTV? Same goes for gender. You could see, for example, females are actually performing much better in my app because the app is maybe tailored more towards them. So in your breakdowns in the ad account, you can check again, what's my spend distribution on female-male? Should I be maybe focusing more on the other gender just because I know they're actually performing well down the funnel?
Well, actually, Marcus, you made a very interesting point because what I actually observe in the Korean market, and not just in Korean market, is user survey is becoming so much important. And that actually, Julia, during her presentation, she also came up with this concept of simple survey. So I believe because it's really important for us to enrich the user profile, well, richer data, more data, that the more we understand about the users, the better we can set up the strategy, the better personalized campaigns that we can set up. So actually, as Marcus mentioned, it's not only just good for the customer engagement, it's good for the user acquisition standpoint as well, because if you ask a lot of questions when they get onboarded, you get to understand their age group, their gender, what they're up to, what they want to do in this app. So if you have this data, you will be able to calculate the LTV per each breakdown of the age group, each breakdown of the age group and everything, and then you will be better understanding who are your core user group, who are your power users, and you can actually focus your budget on those who are actually delivering you the highest value. So in that sense, I just totally agree that you should ask more questions to the customers, not only for the user acquisition, but for the life cycle orchestration as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it really helps kind of all parts of your marketing, CRM as well as user acquisition. It just gives you the much deeper picture of what is your traffic, what's performing well, and yeah, every marketer should be kind of able to look into these brackets and figure out what is my ideal audience mix and look into your ad platform. Am I spending on this audience or is it actually a different one?
So what should marketer do if they have this information in place? What would be their next actionable item?
Yeah, so really kind of look at the breakdown data. I would even kind of, if you have a scaled marketing team already, I would automate these, so pull all the data you can get, from example, from Meta ads or also Snapchat offers these, where you can see what's my spend per age group. And by that you can just, yeah, here's an example, for example, of the gender breakdown on Meta ads that shows you, in this example, you're spending only 2K on the female audience and around about 12K on the male audience. Now, you want to look into your product analytics and check, like how well do these audiences perform? Are females actually super valuable to us? Then maybe I need to adjust my marketing to actually talk to these users better and make sure we're spending equally on both genders or even more on female. Same goes for age breakdowns. You can see easily like what are the ages that I'm spending on. Oftentimes when you go broad, it's going to be young age groups, a lot of spend, older age groups, a lot less spend because they're more expensive. And that's always the first thing I would question, because also older age groups tend to perform better in the app because just they have higher purchasing power. And if you go broad, the algorithm tends to think, I'm going to bring in cheap trial starts, which are coming from young audiences, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do.
Yeah, so interesting thing that you mentioned is these data can be actually collected in two ways. One, you can do the in-app survey. You can actually ask the users when they get onboarded. You can ask them anytime through in-app messages, or you can visit, for example, like Meta dashboard, and then you'll be able to go into the reporting section, and these ad platforms will have the demographic insights and any kind of like placement-related insights just for you, so you can refer to these data from these two perspectives. So maybe then we can move on to our last topic of creative testing.
Yeah, sure. So creative testing, I think there's this metaphor, I'm not sure if you heard it. It used to be like throwing spaghetti against the wall. So back before ATT, how most of the teams operated, how I operated and the companies I worked with operated was that you came up with a whole bunch of creative concepts in kind of your, in the team, in the company. You barely ever talked to users. You just came up with a ton of things, tested them, and the algorithm would tell you, okay, this is the one performing best based on the granular data tracked based on the IDFA. Now that this is gone, actually, it became a bit more complex, but I think it also became a lot more powerful how we have to think about creative iterations. So, like, I learned a lot of this actually from D2C advertisers who are like very, very good at their audience research and really figuring out who's my audience, what are their pain points, what are the outcomes I'm driving for them, and making those into the angles for your ad creatives. And I think that's something also apps need to adopt these days. So really make sure that user interviews, going through your reviews on the App Store is part of the process, so that you constantly learn like what do users think about us, like how are they talking about the app, and what are the outcomes we're driving for them. And that should be kind of the most important piece that informs your creative strategy. It became a lot more important to also look into the on-platform metrics. So like back then, it was just creative performed or didn't perform. Now, as creative testing got a lot more expensive, you want to look into much more granular data on your ad platform. And again, so that can be the hook rate of a video, how many people watched up until second 3, the hold rate, how many people watched until second 15, click rates, and then conversion rates, which kind of gives you this funnel that you can look into already on the upper funnel end, and you can derive insights from that. Even by just knowing how many people watched the video, you know how engaging this content is and can derive a lot of learnings from this and get better over time. Also, something that I usually suggest advertisers is to do a staged rollout for completely new creative concepts, just because it's very hard to figure out if a specific piece of creative actually does well in the long term. You are able to see these upper funnel trends and kind of, am I driving a good cost per trial, cost per engaged trial? But you still don't know how the long-term performance of these users are. So like when you've found a completely new concept with a different angle talking to a different audience, I would always recommend that you only roll this out first in maybe your tier 2 countries, so a separate campaign, and then give it some time to figure out how the metrics in the product behave, so that you don't roll out a creative to your whole account that might hurt performance in the long term. And last piece to this puzzle, as I already mentioned, is the engaged trial, just because it gives you this look into the more down funnel performance. And if you structure your campaigns in a way where you only test new concepts in a separate ad set, you will also have granular tracking on that. So yeah, just remember, in the end, with SKAN 3, you still don't have tracking on a creative level. So if you test new creatives, put them in a separate ad set so you can actually see the down-funnel performance with an engaged trial, and that should help you to really rule out which ones are driving better down-funnel performance.
Makes sense. So, I mean, as a marketer who's in Korea, back in 2019, because we know all these metrics, and then all the feedback loop worked like magic, just instantly. So, as a marketer, we would just do something in Korea like 막 던진다, and then we would find out the performance of each creative, and then 베리치다, and then we kind of expanded all these creatives very easily. But now under SKAN, because we can't do that anymore because of post-back delay, because privacy threshold, because of the fact that SKAdNetwork 3.x doesn't actually provide the creative level analysis, you would need to consider a lot of these factors just on the side to really achieve the same level of efficiency that you used to have in the past.
Yeah, and I think in the end it kind of makes us better marketers, because you have to include audience research, you have to actually go out and talk to customers, and like marketing became a lot less technical, I would say, and you're more user-centric. And for me, it actually unlocked a lot kind of better performance in the end just by being able to do that. So SKAN kind of pushed things in the right direction, I think.
So just two quick questions about the stage rollout. So first of all, do you believe that iOS creative results can be interchanged with the Android creative results? So can you use them interchangeably? That's one question. And second is, if you are servicing your product to just one country, how do you do the staged rollout?
Yeah. So I think mostly the results are interchangeable. Like I've spent a lot of budget on campaigns for a lot of apps, and in 99% of the cases, kind of the same creatives will work on Android that work on iOS. So if you have an Android app as well as an iOS app, and both are kind of working fine, you have a good LTV, then it's also, of course, always an option to still test on Android while it's a little bit easier at the moment, and then port these results to iOS. So that can be a good tactic to still be testing in a way that you are used to it, and that is a little bit easier. When it comes to the stage rollout, when you're only live in one country, it gets a bit more complicated, because usually when you're live in one country, you have one campaign, one ad set, so there is no such thing at kind of staging your rollout. So really just make sure that you're looking at the onboarding survey results that we've mentioned before, and look how things change there once you roll out the new creative. Because it can happen that, for example, in the rep chat example, they had producers and singers on there. So maybe the new creative actually brings in producers into the app, while it used to be singers, and they might perform a lot different because it's just kind of different features applying to them. Maybe the premium offering isn't as relevant to them. So really make sure that you keep a close eye on what's happening on these product metrics, and don't just roll out a winner and forget about it, and then a month after you're wondering, well, kind of down funnel retention has dropped.
Makes sense. So one practical tip, test on Android first, because we actually see from a lot of these countries that creatives can be used interchangeably between Android and iOS. So Android still gives you a lot of more granular data more instantly. So maybe testing on Android first and expanding that on iOS could be another alternative way to test the creative. So I think due to the time, maybe if there's anything that you would like to actually give out to the marketers as your last tip or advice or tactical practice, could you do that?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to finish on a note on SKAN 4.0, which is kind of rolling out as we speak. I think Meta announced it 4 or 5 days ago or so adoption is rising quickly now. And I think generally kind of SKAN and then privacy sandbox on Android is the future. And it's really worth embracing these and not just always looking for like hacks around, or like how can I still track things if I send people to the web, because this is going to be how you're tracking users in the future. And as I already mentioned, I think in the end, the new systems are actually designed in a way that make us better marketers, just because we're not just following the single source of truth of kind of deterministic attribution, but we're looking at different models like media mix modeling, we're looking at SKAN. As marketers, we're deeply looking into product metrics. And in the end, your understanding of how users behave and what's driving value is going to be much better if then you're just looking at last click and hope that everything is right. So yeah, my last note would be kind of embrace these new functionalities because they are the future and they can be beneficial to you.
Got it, Marcus. So I agree with Marcus just totally. 그래서 저도 제 팁을 한 가지 말씀드리자면 스칸을 피할 수가 없는 것 같아요. 스칸에 대해서 더 많이 공부를 해야 되고 또 스칸에 대해서 더 많이 이해를 해야 되는데 사실 스칸을 잘 활용하는 거에 대한 되게 많은 마케터분들의 연구가 필요하거든요. 그래서 저는 스칸이 이제 애플이 저희한테 좀 보드 게임 같은 거라고 생각을 하고 그 보드 게임의 룰에 맞춰서 마케터가 어떻게 하면 현실의 세계를 근사치의 세계로 옮기느냐. 그래서 거기에 대해서 고민을 많이 하셔야 된다고 생각합니다. So I actually gave them the last tip in Korean. 네. Thank you for joining this session today. You can always find us right there, right side of the venue. So if you have any questions about SKAN, if you have any questions about retention subscription, please come and find Marcus over there. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you, everyone.